As we descend into full-scale authoritarianism, I just wanted to take a moment to discuss the Alien Enemies Act and a series of things that happened around April 19th, 2025 that were shocking. In the evening of April 18th, a group of lawyers received word from their clients that they were being prepared to be shipped outside of the United States under the Alien Enemies Act. So these lawyers brought a lawsuit in the Texas jurisdiction where the detainees were being held. And by the time it got to the court, they had shipped the detainees to a different district of Texas, and so there was no longer jurisdiction lying in that district. So they brought another lawsuit there and it wasn't successful. So the attorneys brought the lawsuit in the district court in DC. And to make a long story short, it escalated up to the Supreme Court within a few hours of that. Around 1 a.m., the Supreme Court issued a decision saying you cannot just deport these people right now while this case is pending. I'm going to read the actual decision to you. It says, "There is before the court an application on behalf of a putative class of detainees seeking an injunction against their removal under the Alien Enemies Act. The matter is currently pending before the Fifth Circuit. Upon action by the Fifth Circuit, the Solicitor General is invited to file a response to the application before this court as soon as possible. The government is directed not to remove any member of the putative class of detainees from the United States until further order of this court. Justice Thomas and Justice Alito dissent from the court's order. Statement from Justice Alito to follow." So the interesting thing about this is that the dissenting justices, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, didn't even have enough time to write a decision. Imagine being the Supreme Court justices. They probably just got a call at like midnight and were like, this is an emergency, you need to act quickly. And for them to make this decision means that they didn't trust what the US government attorney told the prior court a few hours prior. So basically, this is one of Justice Alito's major problems with this decision from the majority of the court. It was a 7-2 decision. So a bunch of the conservative justices sided with the liberal justices and said, you can't just remove them. So earlier, a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court said you can't just deport people under the Alien Enemies Act. They have some limited right to judicial review. At the very least, to determine whether they are part of the class of people who constitute an alien enemy. Imagine the government just says, you're an alien enemy, you're a part of Tren de Aragua, the gang from Venezuela, and therefore we are deporting you. But you're not. You have nothing to do with that gang. Don't you want an opportunity to be able to state that you're not a part of that gang and therefore not subject to summary removal from the United States? That's what due process is. That's what makes America great. And basically, the Trump administration doesn't like that because due process is inconvenient. So the next day, Justice Alito issues a decision. It's several pages long, but I'm going to read a couple highlights. So it basically says, shortly after midnight yesterday, the court hastily and prematurely granted unprecedented emergency relief. And it really was unprecedented. Nothing like this has ever happened before. An attorney representing the government, the US government, in a different matter, informed the district court in that case during a hearing yesterday evening that no such deportations were planned to occur either yesterday, April 18th, or today, April 19th. Actually, that's not entirely true, and we're about to get into that. In sum, literally in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party, within 8 hours of receiving the application, with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. I refused to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under these circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate. Again, false. So Slate actually did a great article about this where they got the transcript from the lower court's hearing, and basically Judge Boasberg repeatedly asked the government attorney, are you about to deport these people? And the response was basically like, all the information I've received suggests that there's no such deportation plan. And so Boasberg, sensing the vagueness in that response, asked it 3 other ways, and the responses were not a definitive no, we are definitely not deporting them. So Judge Boasberg gave the government attorney 30 minutes to call the Department of Homeland Security and figure it out. And the response was equally vague. It was like, well, there were no such deportations planned, but we do reserve the right to deport these people. And then it escalated up to the Supreme Court. So when Justice Alito says that, you know, there were no such deportation plans and the government said nothing was about to happen, why did we need emergency relief in the middle of the night? The government has acted in bad faith repeatedly in these alien enemy cases. The first group of Venezuelans a couple weeks ago that were deported under the Alien Enemy Act to a gulag, basically, or death camp in El Salvador, their attorneys came before Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg ordered the planes turn around and the government was like, whoops, too late, they're already there, nothing we can do about it. They acted super quickly and it was intentional because once they are outside of the US, they are no longer under the jurisdiction of the court. Interestingly, the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision subsequently ordered that the government facilitate the return of some of those people to the United States. And the government has refused to do so, citing issues like, well, El Salvador doesn't want to do it or whatever. You know, it's all BS. The US government can get El Salvador to do whatever it wants. That's really clear. Trump is really good at putting pressure on people to do things, and they clearly just don't want to do it because it looks bad politically and it would not allow them to use the Alien Enemies Act to summarily deport people in the future. In response to this, Trump goes crazy and issues a post, like a tweet or whatever, a Truth Social post, whatever he calls it. And he says, I'm doing what I was elected to do, remove criminals from our country, but the courts don't seem to want me to do that. All right. The courts want you to follow the law because we are the United States and we have laws and due process. My team is fantastic, doing an incredible job. However, they are being stymied at every turn by even the Supreme Court, which I have such great respect for, but which seemingly doesn't want me to send violent criminals and terrorists back to Venezuela or any other country for that matter. People that came here illegally. You need to prove that they came here illegally. You've proved nothing because there have not been any hearings. The Supreme Court just wants you to follow the rules and the process. The courts are intimidated by the radical left who are playing the ref. Great Supreme Court Justice Alito correctly wants to dissolve the pause on deportations. He is right on this. Not really. His decision was issued assuming that the government was acting in good faith and that they weren't making misleading statements, intentionally vague statements, which is just not true. And I guarantee the government was about to actually deport those people. It is so clear by the way that the government attorney was responding to Judge Boasberg's questions that they were literally about to deport those people, and the people who were about to be deported were being prepared to be put on flights. If we do not get these criminals out of our country, we are not going to have a country any longer. Fear-mongering, this is like classic totalitarian fear-mongering to consolidate power. We cannot give everyone a fair trial because to do so would, without exaggeration, take 200 years. Literally admitted that there is no due process anymore. And due process taken away from one person is due process taken away from everybody. It's just a matter of time before he says, you are an alien enemy and you don't have a right to contest that determination, and I can summarily deport you or put you in a detention camp in the United States. We would need hundreds of thousands of trials for the hundreds of thousands of illegals we are sending out of the country. Actually, not entirely true. People who entered within the last 2 years are subject to expedited removal. They don't really have a right to a hearing. And the reality is that every president has dealt with this, and it's just inconvenient that we have laws for the Trump administration. Such a thing is not possible to do. What a ridiculous situation we are in. Make America great again. What makes America great is due process. So by removing due process, we're moving one step closer to full authoritarianism. I mean, that's the president of the United States just ranting and attacking every democratic institution that we have. I'm gonna do another video on the importance of due process and why it is absolutely essential. As these developments continue, as the Supreme Court issues new decisions, I'll be sure to make videos breaking them down and try to simplify and explain them so that you don't have to read every word of every decision of every Supreme Court case, because there are sure to be a lot of them under the Trump administration. If you're interested in topics like these, be sure to subscribe to my channel. By the way, if you're new here, I'm actually an immigration attorney, and most of my videos are not me ranting about things that just happened in the Supreme Court. I actually mostly talk about family-based immigration and naturalization. So if you're interested in any of those topics, or you want to speak to me directly about your immigration process, be sure to schedule a consultation. My information is in the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.